Welcome to the Touchdown NFL podcast, week 13. Mate, we're nearly like on the home straight now, aren't we? It's Lee and Tayyib, just the two of us today. But mate, welcome in. And like I say, we're on the home straight. You can nearly see the playoffs.
Yeah. I think the calculation now for the Lions is 3 more wins, and it's kind of irrespective of what Minnesota and Green Bay may or may not do. So 3 more wins, and the first division title the Lions have had in 30 years, which would be massive. As I said, like I don't think we're in kind of Super Bowl window. Like you look at the 49ers, who've been in 3 of the last 4 NFC Championship games. They've been knocking on the door, and obviously played in the Super Bowl a number of seasons ago. They've been knocking on the door for a number of years now. We're not at that level, but just like in year 3 of what was, as I said, a pretty grim start in 2021 to win the division, have a home playoff game, that's like a massive shot in the arm. So if they can close that out, but it's the one thing I was saying to like a Lions friend of mine's like, you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable now, because normally, like in December, Lions seasons are dead. Like you're looking forward to the draft. Like there was a great tweet from one of the Lions beat writers on The Athletic. He's like, normally by this point I've probably done like 3 or 4 mock drafts, because that's ultimately all there is ever to look forward to. So like you can never be hurt by December football because it's never mattered before in Detroit. You know what I mean? There's an entire generation of fans that are like, well, we don't know how to react to this. Like we're playing really important. And the thing is like as the pressure ramps up, you feel like every loss or every win just feels like even bigger. You know what I mean? Whereas I said, like normally sometimes you might get like a garbage time win in December over a team that, like, normally the Lions at this point have maybe got 4 or 5 wins, and none of these games really ever matter. So you can never really be hurt by the defeats. Do you know what I mean? And the wins are like, oh, well, that's a cool win. That's nice. You know what I mean? Like your expectations become so low. It's like you take anything, and suddenly you've got like some expectations and so. But then it makes the fall even harder. So like that's where, as I said, like for an entire group of general, like probably like people in their 50s and 60s probably saw this, but anyone younger than that are like, well, like we don't know what this is like. Like to us, it's completely alien. So from that point of view, not too far away now, but still got like to finish it off. You know what I mean? Like 2/3 of the job's done, but still got to finish it all off.
Yeah, just on that, you've said 3 wins. Just looking at the Lions, like remaining schedule, the Bears, the Broncos, Vikings twice, and the Cowboys. It's there. It's definitely there. You should get it.
If they play like clean football, I think the one thing the Lions haven't done in recent weeks is like they've not played like consistently in games. They get like really hot and like a roll, and then they've quickly lost momentum, and then like they've kind of had like really big momentum shifts in games, which is kind of what they weren't doing earlier on in the season. They controlled most of the games that they played in earlier on, kind of in September and October. Where in November it's been like, as I said, the games are kind of flip-flopped, and they'll go on stretches where they're red hot and everything works, and then they'll go on stretches where they're ice cold and nothing works. So I think that's slightly frustrating. But you look at the schedule, like realistically, the only game that's like not a concern, because like Dallas have won 14 straight at home. Do you know what I mean? Like that's a difficult place for, like, you could take Kansas City or fill it out. Like that's a difficult place for anybody to go. Realistically, like, you have Denver at home. Like I think they're better, but again, they're not necessarily a great side. Minnesota at home, Minnesota away, which is in an indoor stadium. So again, you're not playing in the elements. Like realistically, like I think they'll go 3-2, and I think they'll probably do it.
Yeah, I think so as well. And just on the opposite end of the spectrum, obviously I'm coming away as a Chargers fan from a win that feels like a loss, which I'll talk a little bit more later on. Obviously, the 6-0, 6-zip win over the Patriots in Foxborough, which was just, I've said to you guys in our Slack chat, just the worst game I've ever willingly sat through as a football fan. It was just absolutely dreadful. And I think, as much as it's a win, like you say, it doesn't do much for us. We were talking about before we just hit record about how little that does for the Chargers season, because as much as we're still sort of in the hunt, on these graphics and things like that, we're not. Let's be honest. It was just a dreadful game, and really, it just kind of leads into a more wide conversation of kind of how the season's going. Really, again, kind of something that we touched on before we hit record. Obviously, this weekend has kind of encapsulated how week to week the season is and how up and down teams' seasons are and teams' weeks are. Because, you got your team, the Lions, who are on upward trajectory, which was sort of predicted, and they're fulfilling it. Whereas, my team, the Chargers, which is always a team that's hyped up. I don't think the hype was quite as hard this year, and they're obviously not fulfilled it. Then you've got, great games such as how we opened up this weekend with the Cowboys and the Seahawks, obviously sharing a bunch of points, and it's a couple of the great wide receivers having great performances in there. And then we finished with a great couple of games, with the late game between the Eagles and the 49ers, and obviously the Chiefs and the Packers, with a lot of meh in the middle of it. And, I've written about a couple of the meh games in the losers column for this week's winners and losers. But yeah, just kind of take me through your thoughts on how week to week this is, and kind of your experience of that as a fan of, you've obviously seen this with maybe positive sort of glasses on, let's say, because your team is having a good season and your team's part of the upswing. But this week and this season is not a normal one.
No, like this has got to be as abnormal a season as I can remember. Like maybe since the year when obviously the final four quarterbacks were Nick Foles, Case Keenum, Blake Bortles, and Tom Brady. Do you know what I mean? It was just kind of and even then, like I don't think that like that particular season, like for as much as like we might knock Blake Bortles, like that Jacksonville defense was ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? Like with Calais Campbell and the Saxonville crew, we kind of, it's weird this season. Kind of, it feels like normally like at this point in the season, trends emerge of like, who like realistically are very, very good teams. Who kind of are really bad teams. And to be fair, like we've probably worked that out a little bit. So obviously people like Carolina and Jets and the Patriots and these people are poor teams. Like they're not great teams. But then it feels like the middle class is so kind of unpredictable. Do you know what I mean? So like, for example, you look the week before, obviously the Steelers won last week. Everyone's like, oh, it's fixed. They had, the most yardage that they've had in Kenny Pickett's career. Everything's great. They fired Matt Canada running up straight, and then they go to Arizona and get destroyed. They score 10 points or whatever. And like, I think that really encapsulates like how bizarre this season has been. There's another one, like the Jags, if they win out, will finish as the 1 seed. The Texans have beaten them already. There's it's so strange. Kind of, I feel like the gap between the top and the middle teams is really, really small. As opposed to like witnessed it in the NFC North, where historically, obviously, the Green Bay Packers were so much better than everybody else with Rodgers and Favre. Like the gap always felt like this is a chasm. Like how are we ever gonna we're gonna have to wait for this guy to leave before like we ever even think about catching up. And it was the odd year where Rodgers got injured, or when the year Khalil Mack went to Chicago and they kind of caught. But over like over a decade stretch, really, the gap between them and us is massive. Same with like New England. With like the gap between them was massive. Whatever team Peyton Manning was quarterbacking, so whether that was Indianapolis or his days in Denver, you knew they were so much better than everybody else. Same with Baltimore and Pittsburgh compared to Cincinnati and Cleveland. Like that division always felt like it ran through Baltimore and Pittsburgh rather than obviously certainly not Cleveland. The Bengals had the odd good year when AJ Green and Andy Dalton and Jeremy Hill, Jeremy Hill, Jeremy Hill was there. But they had the odd, but like it felt like the gap between like the mid teams to the really top teams was massive, And this year it feels muddier than ever. Like you look at like even like say for example, you could make an argument that the Baltimore Ravens are the best team in the AFC. Yeah, they are lost to Pittsburgh and Cleveland. Do you know what I mean? And you wouldn't say either of those two teams are kind of in the same. Like it's weird this year where it feels like even the good teams are having like more kind of odd performances. So like you look at Washington took Philadelphia to overtime. Like again, Washington aren't a great team, and somehow they managed to push arguably the best team, well, the team with the best record in the game, all the way to overtime away from home in Philadelphia. So I think that's why it feels harder this year to predict anything, because I think the gap's narrowed. Like maybe teams like Jacksonville and Miami, certainly, obviously, historic. Like in my lifetime, anyways, the Dolphins have never really been a great side until like the last few seasons. Even though they're a famous franchise, like in my lifetime, like they've never really been that good. Obviously, the Lions haven't been very good in my lifetime. Like you've got like different teams that I feel like have probably jumped up a little bit with like your usual suspects. So like your San Francisco's, Dallas, obviously Philadelphia. But like you look at the AFC seed and it's like well, Jacksonville will be the 1 seed if they win tonight. Miami's the 1 seed currently as it stands, like as we're recording this. It's just a hard, like it feels like the gap's narrowed, and I don't know why that is. Like maybe it's because like there's less like there's still really good quarterbacks in the game, but maybe there's like we all knew pretty much like 15 years ago or 10 years ago, like Rodgers, Brady, Manning, Breeze, Roethlisberger. You know what I mean? Like we're kind of. I'd throw Rivers in there, but obviously Rivers didn't win as many divisional titles as what they did. But like, the thing is, like those guys always seemed again like the gap felt bigger between the real elite quarterbacks and then everybody else. And again, it feels a little bit shorter this year, where you wouldn't necessarily say like Tua might not be in the same bracket as Patrick Mahomes, but in that particular offense and in that team, his numbers are outstanding.
Yeah.
You know, so like I feel like it's closed up, and add that to obviously all the quarterback injuries, and then you've just got more and more chaos every week, which from an entertainment point of view is good. It makes this kind of thing harder because like we'll sit here like, you know, before in September the 49ers looked unbeatable. They destroyed it, and then they went an entire month without winning a game. In October they lost 3, and you know, like it's kind of, it feels like that type of season where something weird can happen at any point. And I think certainly for the playoffs, like something strange could happen at any moment. It really does feel like a one and done situation. Where sometimes I think in previous seasons we've known like realistically the 6 and 7 seeds probably aren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Where like say for example, this is what kind of frightened me as a Lions fan. Like if certain playoff like seedings work, the Lions could host the Packers on the opening round of the playoffs. Obviously, Green Bay's already won at Ford Field, so like it's kind of that type of thing where I feel like it's a mix of like there's less elite quarterback play this season for whatever particular reason. Like you look at even Mahomes, who was the MVP, he hasn't really put up like his type of numbers this season by his standards. Do you know what I mean? So he's come back a little bit to the pack. Obviously, Josh Allen's had his own little troubles. Lamar Jackson's trying to work out a new offense. It feels like kind of all the stars have aligned to have like a really competitive but strange season. And I think that's why like, you look at the wild card races, so many teams that are 6 and 6 or 7 and 5 that are kind of right there. And the other thing as well in the NFC anyways, the NFC South is causing like so much chaos because all those teams are, the top 3 teams are still within one game of each other. And what it also means is like whoever's not like leading that division is still technically in the hunt for a while because like they're all so like bunched up. So I think it's like that's the hard thing with it this year is it's hard to kind of draw anything. Like the Colts have currently the best record. They're like over the last month they've won they're the hottest team in the league, and somehow you know what I mean. Like you wouldn't think that, but the Colts have won 4 in a row. They're playing outstanding football, and yet like it's weird. It just feels like with some offenses have gotten really bad, a lot of injuries, and the gap between I think like the usual elite teams and kind of the up and coming teams it's probably shortened a little bit. I think that's probably the biggest reason why.
Yeah, I think the injuries has been a big thing, hasn't it? Well, we've talked about quarterback injuries in particular, but I think injuries, just in a general sense, have really hit some big players, and it's really, like you say, made this middle class really, really big. I think as well, what kind of contributes to it outside of just the injuries, although like I said, the injuries do contribute to this, is the fact that I feel like even the best teams this season feel flawed. And the teams that we felt maybe going into the season were going to be quite good are flawed. We've talked about, the teams that are 500 thereabouts. I'll just kind of reel off a few. We didn't expect the Texans to be good on the whole, talking about the NFL kind of fandom community as a whole.
Yeah.
We didn't expect that. They've obviously turned out to be a lot better, which has maybe elevated them to 7 and 5 instead of 5 and 7, let's say.
Yeah.
The Colts, Shane Steichen's been a really good hire, and despite not a lot of talent, is elevating that group. The Browns' defense has been incredible, despite no quarterback play of any sort of quality. Joe Burrow's got injured, and maybe that's been reversed. The Steelers, Mike Tomlin's a wizard. We've talked about that before, despite them not being, very good on offense. The Bills, like you say, Matt Milano, Trey Wyatt, the defense has been hit by a lot of injuries. Even the Dolphins, they're 9 and 3. Their defense is not good, and that really means they are beatable. It just contributes towards these one and done.
And they've also had days. They've also had days where the offense. You think like the Frankfurt game against Kansas City, like the offense, like that game was there for the taking, and the offense didn't really kind of click into. So like that's kind of where like it feels like razor thin, like between even the top teams. Like for example, like if Kansas City played Miami tomorrow in like I don't know who you'd make favorite. You know what I mean? Like Miami are more explosive, but Kansas City already won, and they got the best quarterback arguably. And like it's really tough to pick like this season apart. As I said, like normally by this point, like in my lifetime, anyways. Oh yeah, well the Patriots, we know they're really good. Or the Colts, they're really, you know what I mean? Or the Cat, like you've worked out normally like your 5 or 6 teams in either conference that are like they're legit. But like even the Cowboys, like everyone's ready to crown Dak Prescott, but like the defense gave up a ton of points last week. Like and that's
Thursday,
so like it's kind of, as I said, like it feels. Maybe this is what I suppose is the ultimate kind of thing with the NFL. Like we obviously watch sports where like unlimited budgets dominate. You know what I mean? And like top teams can really run away with it. Like you look at 30 years ago, like teams like Man City weren't getting like 95 points in a single season. It didn't happen. It's happening now, where like the NFL obviously it's capped and everyone's so like the Texans is a brilliant one. Like in one off season, they've managed to kind of reload and become not just like semi-competent, really competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And I just went through the AFC, and that rings true for the NFC as well. There's a bunch of teams that are going both these ways. Like you kind of touched upon it before. The Rams kind of on an upswing, the Seahawks going the other way, and there's a lot of football to be played and a lot of playoff places to be shaken out the rest of the way. And it's really exciting for the neutral or people like me whose teams are not going to make it and can kind of switch off when they're not focusing towards their draft sort of prospects.
Yeah.
So let's move on then into our main talking points for this week. I'll let you kick off because I think you've got a really interesting one relating to a QB sort of battle, I'll say, down in New Orleans.
Yeah, like it's still kind of like obviously you've seen Derek Carr a lot more than I ever did. Obviously, he was in that division with the Raiders, but it's still kind of like boggles my mind a little bit that Derek Carr was paid so much money and so much guaranteed money and got like a lengthy-ish contract at this stage of his career, for the Saints to try and extend a window where, like, to me, Derek, like, there's a thing in baseball, like they call it wins above replacement. So like how many wins you're adding above the guy that you've replaced. Like the Saints were like a hovering 9-win team last season with Jameis Winston / Taysom Hill. Is Derek Carr made them that much better? I don't really think so. Like in that first half in particular, as I was saying before with the Lions, like they were red hot on defense and Derek Carr couldn't get anything going. The only time the Saints ever got anything going in the first half in particular was when Derek Carr was booed off the field and Taysom Hill was cheered onto the field, which, as I said, like must be pretty like jarring, because they were loud. They were really loud. You don't always hear it through the TV, but that was loud. And then the roars, and the kind of cheers for Taysom Hill were really loud as well. So it was really jarring. But I think like the Saints have missed a trick here. Like there's no point trying to like, because this team, no matter how well it may be coached and kind of how much experience they've got, they're not on the level of like the Cowboys, the Eagles, or the 49ers. But they're an old team. And at some point they're going to need refreshing. As I said, the Saints have tried like to extend this post Breeze window like ad nauseum. Every off season we're hearing how much cap money they're moving around to kind of create cap space, but so they can get under the salary cap for the day one of the official league season. But I think it's like a bit flawed because ultimately you're paying Derek Carr so much money, and he's not going to be that much better. He's not £100 million better than what Taysom Hill would be. And as I said it yesterday, like the only time the Saints offense looked good was when Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara were either running the ball or Chris Olave was involved. And to me, like I look at Hill and I think you guys were better off. He's a cheaper option. He's probably a more exciting option for the fans, because ultimately he's kind of insane. Like, let's be honest, like he's probably the best tight end on the Saints' roster. He's probably the best special teamer on the Saints' roster, and he's probably the most effective quarterback on the Saints' roster. Now, I get like it's a long because ultimately so much of his ability is running. So if you make him the starting quarterback, if he eventually he's going to get hurt. Do you know what I mean? Like, so like I get like the thinking behind, well, we need a conventional quarterback and we'll let you do what it is that you do, which is kind of everything else. But I still feel like in the drop back passing game, they're not a good offense.
No.
It's not a good offense at all. As I said, the most dangerous they looked yesterday was when the ball was in Taysom Hill's hand, or Alvin Kamara's hand, and I'm like, you guys should just roll with that, see where it takes you. Because at some point, even if Derek Carr played at like a Pro Bowl level, they're gonna have to draft somebody. Like they can't just keep kind of like thinking, oh, we're going to keep kind of patching this with like experienced quarterbacks that maybe aren't of like that highest quality. So at some point, that we're going to need to draft a quarterback anyways. You don't need to pay 100 million quid to Derek Carr over 3 years or 4 years. Keep Taysom Hill, keep Jameis Winston, like platoon that how you want to platoon it, and then eventually, when like you have like a poorish season, you can draft your quarterback, and then suddenly
absolutely.
you can reset the whole thing rather than kind of try and patch a hole that, like, as I said, like realistically, I don't know like what it's achieved. Like the Saints are still like at max a 9-win team that probably will lose in the first round of the playoffs. Like
there's no real value for the Saints right now. Like you've just been talking earlier about how the NFC South is so close. There's no value in the Saints winning the division. Because what they're going to do, like you say, they're just going to be one and done, and they'll convince themselves that they can kick the can down the road again.
Yeah, well, that's what they will do. And like a lot of Saints fans that I follow are kind of like concerned that we'll win the division. They'll turn around and say, "Well, it worked," and then but for a team that was like obviously, particularly in the latter part of Drew, like they were always not. Obviously, they had the Minnesota Miracle and then the Rams game that was the PI call. But they were right there, and I think that's what they want to get back to. And as I said, like to me, I think the quicker way of getting back to that was letting Taysom Hill probably play quarterback, let him do what it is that he does, and then say, for example, if you still win 9 games and you're one and done, okay, fair enough. Like that's what we are at this moment. But if you win 6 games and end up with a top 16 pick, go draft your quarterback and see where it takes you, rather than kind of feels like, as I said, it just feels like they're trying to extend the post Breeze era without Drew Brees, and kind of like that guy's a Hall of Famer. Like he's a Hall of Famer for a reason. Not just Derek Carr, he's had a solid enough career. He's in a Hall of Famer. You know what I mean? Like he isn't a Hall of Fame quarterback. And it's like to me, like I just feel like it's flawed thinking from an organization that's like they actually did really well in the latter part of the 2010s. To kind of re-kickstart, like post Super Bowl years, they had a dip when the defense was really bad. The offense was still really good, but the defense was bad. Then the 2017 draft, when I think they drafted Ramczyk, Hendrickson, Kamara, and Lattimore in that same class, which is a ridiculous class, by the way. It kind of re-kickstarted them in the kind of near the end of the Drew Brees era. But it just feels like they're kind of being like maybe a bit too smart for themselves and trying to say, look, we're still competing, but you didn't need to pay Derek Carr that much money to be like maybe 1 win better than what you may have been with Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill. Do you know what I mean? Like they've shown in the last 2 years before Derek Carr got there, the Saints are a 9-win team. Really, that's their ceiling. Well, they're still a 9-win team. Like that's their ceiling. They might win the division, but then obviously they'll play the Cowboys, and the Cowboys will beat them. Just like whoever wins that division, the Cowboys will beat them. So to me, it's just frustrating to see like a team kind of shoot themselves in the foot and also like now, like they kind of stuck into it for at least another season. Like Derek Carr's going to be the starting quarterback, like unless they're willing to eat a ton of dead cap money and find a trade partner for him. Like they're going to have to stick with that. So then, what do you like? As I said, I still don't think it's the most effective because that offense it just doesn't work like with him in a drop back passing game. The play action game works a little bit better because they've got the threat of Kamara and Hill. But the standard drop back, it just doesn't work. Like outside of Chris Olave, like none of it really kind of clicks into place. And so to me, it's like well, you bought Derek Carr to improve that, and it hasn't improved. So like, what's the point of carrying on with this experiment? But as I said, they've made that decision, and frustratingly, I think they are going to have to pay for it for another season.
Yeah, no, I've said this a couple of weeks ago when we were on here. Like the Saints just need to turn it in and just admit that it's time to turn the page. And like you say, it's maybe more exciting for the fans that you have Jameis Winston, and maybe that points them towards potentially looking at doing what Seattle did with Geno Smith, in that if they don't have the high-end draft capital to get a Caleb Williams, to get a Drake May, which they won't because they're not amongst the worst of the worst teams in the NFL. So, those 2 top-end quarterbacks that are in this draft are probably out of reach. With I'll just say the 16th because that's what you said. with the 16th pick, are they going to be able to get a real needle mover for the long term at quarterback? Likelihood is probably not in this next draft, not for my money anyway. So what can they do? Can they repackage a veteran who maybe needs a bit of rehabilitation, like Geno did when he went to Seattle? This potentially is going to be a new trend. Geno might be the trend setter in this regard, that old quarterbacks who need a new home. There's plenty of highly drafted quarterbacks who haven't worked out. Zach Wilson, let's say, for example. I'm not saying Zach Wilson's the answer, but people of its ilk who with the second, with the third, with the fourth overall pick, it then just flamed out at their first team. They're going to need another team. Those guys were drafted at those positions for a reason, right? So, and Geno wasn't one of those guys, but this is maybe where the NFL is going to go, because there's plenty of these guys in the scrap heap. Mac Jones, for example, is going to be one of these guys next year. Can these teams repackage a Mac Jones, a Zach Wilson, make them into something, and they get above the contract that they're paid? Because you're talking about Derek Carr being paid below the contract, or playing below the contract he's being paid.
Yeah.
Can someone kind of flip that, like the Saints, and build a young roster around that with the money that they save? Obviously, it's a couple of years away, like I say, because Derek Carr is still going to be paid by this team one way or another. But that to me is the way that the Saints need to go, whether that be Jameis Winston, whether that be Taysom Hill, because they're not on a lot of money, or whether that be one of these other veteran quarterbacks, because they're not going to draft another guy who's a young guy who's potential superstar for me anyway. But yeah, the Saints need to have a complete change of direction in what they're doing, because they can't keep kicking the can down the road in typical Mickey Loomis fashion. And they probably outside that, just as like a finishing point, they probably need some coaches that are a bit more forward thinking, that aren't Dennis Allen, that aren't Pete Carmichael, and trying to recreate what Sean Payton had 10 years ago.
Well, that's like Dennis Allen, I think, is 20 and 45 as a head coach. If you look at his tenure with the Raiders, like ultimately, that's not really good. I just think, like, again, it feels like I could understand kind of extending the window for as long as Breeze and Payton were there, because they probably felt like you guys are still like, we've always got a chance with you guys. But I think for me, it was worth kind of saying, listen, like, that era's over. It was the most incredible. You got to understand, like, Saints fans used to go to games before Sean Payton when they were brown bags over their head. Like, they were effectively the Cleveland Browns in like the early 2000s. They were terrible, and they went there, they turned that around, they had an amazing run. Like, nobody can ever kind of like say what they did in New Orleans was a failure. But then I think you've just got to say, you know what, we'll ride Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill and see kind of where the draft takes us with a quarterback, rather than, as I said, now that like they won't, like, even if, like, for example, like, I don't know, like Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr. or someone like that, like, if they said, oh, we really liked, but how are you going to work that? Because Carr's on the roster next year, unless, as I said, somebody comes in and makes a ridiculous trade for him. He's on the roster. You're not getting rid of Jameis, because ultimately Carr's had injury problems this season. So Jameis is like the safety blanket, because then you can't get rid of Hill because of everything that he does on the team, like not just at quarterback with running the ball as a tight end on and then obviously if he plays a quarterback, he's likely to get hurt as well. So like, you're not going to take another quarterback like in the first round and have four quarterbacks. Like, it's kind of like I don't know. It just feels like another kind of. I always say, like, the NFL, like, being in the no man's land of the NFL is worse than either being really terrible or really good. Because at least if you're really terrible, you can see kind of a path like the Texans have done. Do you know what I mean? You can see kind of like what the Jags did with Lawrence. Like, there's a kind of light at the end of the tunnel. Well, with the Saints, it's like we're going to be subjected to kind of another purgatory season next season of like, maybe we win 9 games and like we'll be bounced out in the first round of the playoffs, and if we're really bad, we might win 6 games. And it's kind of like, we're not, like, as I said, it's kind of, they've shot themselves in the foot now. As I said, like, they've got left themselves nowhere to go, and it can't be good now as well. Like, the fact that Carr's getting so much criticism like so early on in his tenure in New Orleans, like, that's not good. Like, if they're cheering for Taysom Hill, who's like a gadget quarterback, or Jameis, who's obviously massively inconsistent, like, as I said, like, I don't know how you rectify that situation now. It just feels like a broken situation that they're going to pay a lot for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, pay a lot in a lot of ways, I would say. Time, money, failures. Yeah, it's an interesting situation because, like you say, success feels quite tangibly close because of the division they play in. But Yeah, definitely. Like I say, one to watch moving forward. But yeah, it's a sticky situation. It's going to be interesting to see how they get out of that from a neutral's point of view. But yeah, my biggest talking point, just to move on, is just kind of a theme that we've hit on a few times throughout the season. The fact that there is just zero shortage of top-notch defensive talent in the NFL. Like, we've talked about this. I've talked about this personally about AJ Brown being potentially the best wide receiver in football, and he's not really slowed down. The Eagles lost last night, but he played really, really well. In the same game, Christian McCaffrey's now got 30 touchdowns in 26 games since he was traded to San Francisco. Obviously, we've talked about Tyreek Hill. A bunch over at the touchdown. A lot of our writing in the early season was about Miami and how that offense has gone, and he is probably going to get 2,000 yards receiving, which is just insane. CD Lamb, he's gone on to another level. Again, another great performance, as kind of alluded to, against Seattle. Keenan Allen, for my Chargers, has been one of the lone bright spots, having a career year at 31 years old. And that's just a snippet of the players. And obviously, what I want to kind of discuss on this talking point in how much good offensive play there is by skill position players is obviously the MVP goes to a quarterback. It's pretty much like the quarterback on the best roster who have the best record for this season. And there are some awards, obviously, with Defensive Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year, but I don't think they're made enough of. We've talked about Myles Garrett, we've talked about other players, TJ Watt, and Deron Bland, for example. Obviously, he's got the pick six, the kind of return record. There's not enough made of it. Obviously, you've got highlights, things like that. But should there be better, more prestigious awards for these guys who are just excelling every week?
Oh yeah, like 100%. Like I don't know how you could like tweak it or like word it. I don't know. Like I'm sure you could create an award. I think JJ Watt said like this is what I hate about like the MVP award, because it's become like a semantics based award. Because if you just break it down as who's the most valuable, like to me, like again, like to use like we have like PFA Player of the Year or the Player of the Season award. Like it's just like we don't necessarily look at like who's been the most value. Like, do you know what I mean?
Like Matt Letitia, basically, for Southampton.
Yeah, because like say for example, like that's a brilliant example, because like if we had a most valuable player, so many people would have made the argument, well, he's the most valuable player to his team because he was the only reason why they never got relegated. Do you know what I mean? But like, so I feel like people have got kind of so hung up on like, and maybe this is kind of like again looking at it from like a football point of view, like people have got so hung up with looking at it like the wording of it and thinking, oh well, this player's more valuable or this position's more. Like to me, I'd be controversial and scrap the MVP award. Like still have like an Associated Press MVP award. So like obviously the NFL writers have voted, just like we have like PFA writers, Football Player of the Year. You still have that award, but I would just have like who's like the most outstanding player or the best player of the NFL season, just because like we should like value these positions so much more. Like the 49ers were kind of bobbing along okay-ish before McCaffrey went there. McCaffrey's gone there and they've hardly lost since. Like, you know what I mean? The only times they've lost is when they ran out of quarterbacks in the NFC title game, or when they had that like mid spell in October where he was injured and Deebo Samuel was injured. Like they've hardly lost. Like you could argue that him being there has taken that team from already a good team to like an exceptional team. So you could argue that his value to that team is more than what Brock Purdy's is, or like I feel like we should have better awards, because like I said it like a few weeks ago, like certainly running backs or wide receivers, like they provide just as many highlights as what quarterbacks do. You know,
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like obviously, like you watch LaDainian Tomlinson, like he was incredible. That man was like a YouTube highlight reel basically every time he took the field. It was unfortunate he didn't play in the YouTube era, you know. But like, you know, like that's kind of, you know, Calvin Johnson was like that for the Lions. Like he was just ridiculous. But I always feel like you should recognize these guys more, because one, like the entertainment factor they bring to games, like Miami Dolphins games. Yes, like Tua's really good and Alec Ingold's good and Jalen Watt, like, and they're all good to watch. And Raheem Mostert and Devon Achan and these people, but like the number one attraction is Tyreek Hill. Like because you know at any point when the ball's in his hands, he could break this game wide open. You know, just like he did yesterday. Obviously, you went bananas yesterday and destroyed Washington. Same with McCaffrey. Same with Deebo Samuel. Like I feel like we should have like a better reward for them, because like those guys provide just as much value from an entertainment point of view and from like a wins point of view and like how much, like you look at Samuel and McCaffrey, they are just as valuable to their team as a quarterback is to his team on another
I'd
roster.
agree.
You know, same with Tyreek Hill. Like you take Tyreek Hill away, that Miami offense isn't half as good without him as it would be with him. So like, you know, like let's kind of recognize that these guys are like really, really good. And to be fair, we're like like so obsessed with quarterbacks. Kind of annoys me all the time because like
Yeah,
there's so many
same.
good players. There's so many good players like at other positions. Like irrespective of like where they like Puka Nakua, he's come in and been exceptional as a rookie. Like, you know, obviously Jamar Chase is really good and Devontae Smith and all these people are like exceptional talents.
Mhm.
And I feel like they always just get like forgotten or left by the wayside. Like what McCaffrey's done is ridiculous. When you think like in Carolina, a lot of people were questioning. Like he became the poster boy for like, oh, you don't pay a running back because they paid him and then he kept getting injured. You know, and not
Yeah,
only has he been reliable in San Francisco, he's been electrifying.
yeah.
You know, so like I feel like we should. I don't know how. Like maybe there's another reward. Like you
Well,
could do like a
I've got a
best
couple of
player or
things.
something. Yeah.
I've got a couple of things. So I think you've got to separate out the quarterback award from the other offensive players. I think that is a given. You've got to do that. Then you've got to, I would say, I've heard this elsewhere, this is not my suggestion, but going the same way that the NBA does in the fact that they've got 3 all NBA teams rather than the NFL just having 2. I think, you know, the all pro teams, I think that would be better just to extend that a little bit more. And you could even go the NBA route of having like an all defense team and all something else, whatever that might be. Obviously, won't work because the defense would be just defensive players, and that doesn't really work in the NBA sense. But having like an all something team that's completely
Yeah.
separate. And then the other thing as well is a little bit like what the Premier League does is make a little bit more of like players of the month, player, you know, like they do with like manager of the month,
Yeah.
things like that. Players of the week. That is a very, very minor thing in the NFL. But having that and then, you know, something offshooting that's like a season long thing of you won the most players
Yeah.
of the month award. I don't know, there's just things like that. They could just hype up a little bit more rather than it just being this, you know, 3 awards essentially. And, you know, the college awards as well. The college awards do great work with like the various
Yeah.
position groups and things like that.
Well, same with baseball. Like they have, you know, Silver Slugger Award and Cy Young Award, and you know, the home run champion, and this. You know what I mean? Like there's so many more awards that get given out in other sports. I think it's just frustrating. I think it's particularly this year because like the quarterback players being inconsistent. It's boring. Like
Yeah,
every week,
yeah,
like I've joked about, every week there's been a new MVP. So like
yeah.
last week it was Jalen Hurts. So last week it was Jalen Hurts because the Eagles won. This week is Brock Purdy. In the middle of this week, or in the middle of last week, it
It's
was Dak
Dak.
Prescott.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
yeah.
normally by this point in the season, we've known who the quarterback or who the MVP quarterback, probably one or two. Like you look at the seasons when Rodgers won it, pretty much clear cut that unless Rodgers got injured, he's going to win it. Even the year Carson Wentz would have won it. Like that's how kind of mad it is. Carson Wentz obviously is no longer a starting quarterback, but before he got hurt in LA in 2017, he was the MVP. Like we knew that by like week 11, week 12 that he was going to be the MVP of that particular season. Where this year, as I said, it just feels like whoever plays well on like a standalone game is like, well, that guy's the MVP now.
On a prime
You know,
time
like
game.
yeah. Like so, like to me, it just feels like if we're having this kind of thing of like we're just flip flopping between different quarterbacks because they've played well that particular weekend, maybe there isn't really a standout quarterback to give it to. You know, and then
Yeah.
in that instance, why not? Like it's kind of insane that like I think every quarterback or every MVP winner since maybe Sean Alexander won it, or when there was co-MVPs, that year in mid 2000s with Seattle. I think every year has been a quarterback, which is kind of
Yeah.
like when you think of like you know Adrian Peterson rushing for 2,000 yards, Derrick Henry rushing for 2,000 yards, back-to-back
Chris
seasons.
Johnson.
By the yeah, you know what I mean. Obviously Marshawn Lynch's year when Seahawks got to the Super Bowl, like beast mode, like it's kind of a joke in that like. And again, it's probably kind of we've become desensitized because people like Brady and Manning were so good. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah,
they were
absolutely. Yeah, it's a good
like
point.
because they were so good, like unless something strange happened, they would have been the MVP most seasons that they played in. Same with Rodgers to a certain extent. Obviously, he's injured this year, so he hasn't played, and everybody else has been inconsistent. It's like, why not recognize like other players that have brought like just as much excitement, just as much value, just as much entertainment to the game as what quarterbacks have done? Like, let's be honest, quarterback play this year hasn't been great at all. Like, it's
Yeah.
been really inconsistent. Like, there's been like massive highs and massive lows for everybody. even the really top, like obviously Mahomes turning the ball over 3 times against Denver. Do you know what I mean? Like, when does that happen? Like, so like those types of things kind of infuriate me because like there are other positions in this game that make this game like
Yeah,
worth
absolutely.
watching. You know what I mean? Like, like there's more to it than just them.
Yeah, even it goes, just as like a final point, it goes to the fact that I don't even think enough was made of like Cooper Cup winning like the Triple Crown last year. Like it was a little bit, but it wasn't like this massive fanfare. You think that's like how much in this country, in the Premier League, or in football in general, like the Golden Boot winner gets like a lot of press. Alan Shearer's Premier League goal
Yeah,
scoring record gets brought up all the time. In respect to like Harry Kane, potentially, when he was still at Spurs, potentially
yeah.
going after it. The England goal scoring record gets brought up loads, but who was the top touchdown scorer the year before last? I can't even remember. It
Wouldn't
might have
know.
been Justin Jefferson. I don't know. That's my guess.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
But I don't know because it's not made a big deal of. It's strange. But yeah, the wider point is we need more fanfare for these offensive players in particular that are non-quarterback that this year are setting the game alight. And there are some defensive players that are doing exactly the same. But yeah, I just thought I'd bring that up as my big talking point because, like you say, the league is so week to week that these guys just need bringing up because they're the ones providing the entertainment at the end of the day. But let's move on into our games of the week. I'll kind of kick this one off. I'm obsessed with the AFC South. Everyone who's watched our podcast over the past few weeks will know this. It's usually the Texans that I'm talking about, all the Jags. But we got the other two teams this week playing each other, the Titans versus the Colts. And I want to ask the question, is it time to worry about Mike Vrabel and the Titans? Because the Titans are clearly the fourth best team in this division. Obviously, you've got Will Levis now. He has played the last 5 games, I think. Is he good enough to lead Tennessee past Stroud, Lawrence, and even Anthony Richardson, who looked pretty good earlier in the season, who was obviously drafted way before him? Now, this is not meant to be a knock on Will Levis. Obviously, he's early in his career. He hasn't had enough sample size yet for anyone, especially me, to make a judgment. But we know that the AFC as a whole has got a lot of great quarterbacks, none of whom are very old, barring Aaron Rodgers. So to run the gauntlet and to reach the Super Bowl, do they need someone better? And obviously, you can't just keep drafting quarterback year after year after year. But Levis really hasn't shown that he's able to elevate those around him. I don't think he did that in college either. So, you've got to think that the Tennessee Titans, to make the playoffs, they're probably going to have to win the AFC South. That's going to be extremely difficult from now on, I would say, which is unfortunate for them. Does Vrabel have it in him to make the rebuild that to that level, especially when Derrick Henry gets older? This is a wider problem for me. The Colts just showed that, as I said before. Shane Steichen looks like a home run head coaching hire. They're doing it with not a lot. Jonathan Taylor didn't play in this game. They're missing Richardson, like I say. The defense isn't great, and they're still able to beat the Titans in overtime. In a really, really entertaining game. It kind of goes into what we've been talking about in terms of how much this has been week to week. And the Colts are looking good, are looking like way ahead of their development curve right now. Just a wider question: what do you think about the Titans' prospects moving forward, and Mike Vrabel as well? Because he'll be looking at that potential opening in New England, I'm sure.
Well, that's one thing. Like the New England press have been like red hot on all like over the last 3 or 4 weeks is like how great would it be to bring a Patriots legend, 3-time Super Bowl winner back to New England as part of the new. I think the thing with Vrabel is this is from an outside looking in, like he's a very much like players coach, but I think
Yeah,
that can
absolutely.
also
Yeah.
kind of like I think that maybe has backfired on him a little bit as the Titans have gotten a little bit weaker. Is that like like for as much as he knows football inside out, listen, you don't play for New England for so long and you don't win what you did with New England for so long, and you're not like text friends with Tom Brady without knowing like what you know about football. Do you know what I mean? But I think the
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
with the Titans is they've never had like a massive like. It's always felt like the players have made that like it sounds stupid, but the players have made that better. Like if you look at the Rams, for example, McVay's got a plan, and it's almost like his plan is elevating the players. Like pretty inexperienced roster that a lot of people said they'll be terrible this season. Well, they're right in the playoff hunt in December, which is probably further ahead than what a lot of us thought it would be. Where I think with the Titans, it was kind of the players made that team. So their offense was pretty rudimentary. It was AJ Brown, Jonnu Smith in the red zone, Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill being brilliant on play action. There wasn't a lot much to it. Like the thing with the Titans, like they were hard to stop, but they weren't like the game plan wasn't difficult to stop. Like you just had to find a way of like matching their intensity and matching their physicality, which Vrabel always brings. You know what I mean? Like he would do. So I think from that point of view, it's hard because like you look at their offense and it's like DeAndre Hopkins is their best offensive weapon, but like he's now like in the latter stages of his career. Or obviously, we mentioned it a few weeks ago, like the Treylon Burks pick hasn't worked out as well as what they would have hoped. They haven't really replaced Jonnu Smith. The offensive line's always kind of been bad there, particularly like once Taylor Lewan started getting his injuries at left tackle. It's always kind of been a bit of flux in Tennessee with the offensive line. So I feel like is Vrabel the man? I think he can be, but you got to get him the players. Like for me, I don't think he comes across as the type of coach, particularly on offense, that's going to make like significant kind of scheme changes to make his players that much better. I think he's very much kind of, well, if you give me the players, I'll get the best out of them, but I need the right guys. As I said, you look at AJ Brown, brilliant wide receiver. Jonnu Smith was a really good red zone target, and Derrick Henry's been one of the best rushers over the last 5 or 6 years. So
absolutely.
so you put that in the mix, and like, yeah, Vrabel, but like, I don't think Vrabel could do what like McVay's done, and like take kind of almost just like anonymous guys and put them together in an offense that's kind of working. Like he's not that type of coach. Is he under pressure? Like, yeah, because like they finished the season last season pretty badly. They collapsed at the final hurdle, and obviously Jacksonville won the division. And then obviously this season has been a struggle as well. So I think like, and the other thing with Levis is feel for him. Like you're so much kind of like so much luck. So like if the AFC South was like its typical really bad division with like Blake Bortles and Brian Hoyer and whoever else, like Will Levis would be a genius. Like he'd look like the best, you know what I mean? But then
he'd be the young thing up and coming, wouldn't he? Rather than being
yeah.
like
Do
the
you know what I
third
mean?
one. So
Yeah, where like with fate, sometimes it's really cruel because like you get dropped into a division with Lawrence. We all know about Lawrence, what he did at Clemson, what he's doing at Jacksonville. Stroud just looks incredible. I think Anthony Richardson will hopefully be good. He always flashed with his Florida Gator stuff. Like he always looked incredible in terms of his athleticism. See how he comes back, but like suddenly it's like well, hang on, I'm the fourth best, and I've just got here, and that's hard. Like
yeah.
It is, and then obviously you branch it out. Like he's not going to be better than Mahomes. He's not going to be better than Allen. He's not going to be better than Herbert. He's not going to be better than Burrow. You know what I mean? Who knows what Rodgers? He's not going to be better than Lamar. So like it's hot. Like it's hard, man. Like it sounds really crass, but like welcome to the NFL. Like this is kind of the toughness of it all, particularly the AFC now, because like there's just no hiding place. Like if you've not got a quarterback, or if your quarterback, like that's the level he's got to get to, and that's a really, really high level. And you look like it,
high standards.
Yeah, like it's such a high standard, and you look at like Mac Jones and Zach Wilson, like it hasn't worked for them. You know, I'm not saying Will Levis is going to be like them, but it's hard to try and reach that standard because for some people you're not going to get there. Like some might, you know, like Baker Mayfield ultimately was deemed not good enough by Cleveland. He was a former first overall pick and Heisman Trophy winner. Like it's really difficult. I'm not sure. Whether Levis is the answer. But I suppose what they could always say is, well, we took him in the second round as a little bit of a punt. You know what I mean? Like we didn't, like it wasn't like we did what Carolina did and move up to get him and kind of trade future picks. So I suppose it's one of those situations. It's probably easier to kind of not to commit yourself. Where Carolina will now feel compelled, like they have to commit to Bryce Young. They can't just kind of say, "Oh, we're done with Bryce now after a year." You know what I mean? You move so much to get him, you got to give him enough rope to work it out. Well, I suppose with Levis, like if the Titans drafted somebody else in the mid rounds of the upcoming draft and said, "Well, we're going to see how it goes in camp and we're going to let them fight it out," it's not going to be like a massive deal because ultimately they didn't invest a ton into him. But for him, it's like just got to get your head down and work it out. Like it's hard because like the standard in the AFC with the quarterbacks is just a joke. Like it's ridiculous. Like how high it is. So like for him, I don't know.
Yeah, for anyone who's keeping their eye on Tankathon, the Titans have the 8th overall pick as things stand. So if they keep losing, they can always draft another one for the third year in a row. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how realistic that is. But and obviously, in all this final point, look, Malik Willis obviously lost in the shuffle as well as Ryan Tannehill. He's obviously on his way out, but we'll kind of see how that shakes itself out. It's just an interesting point for a very interesting game. An exciting game that we went down to overtime at the end of the day, and Jacksonville and Gardner Minshew pulling it out the bag, which again in itself is kind of remarkable. But yeah, you've got the Rams and the Browns as your game of the week. Probably one that not many people watched because it was on at the same time as the Eagles versus 49ers.
Eagles, yeah. Well, obviously, those are the only two games on. And, obviously, Eagles, 49ers, and I watched this one. But, we talk so much about those teams that, kind of, and to be fair, the Rams quietly have won 3 in a row. They're right there on the bubble.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough,
yeah.
the Brett Ripien, probably the worst game of this season, the Brett Ripien, when Jordan Love and the Packers were still figuring out game, is currently the deciding factor. Between why Green Bay are the 7th spot and why the Rams are the 8th spot, which is kind of mad to think, it comes down to that. And this was actually, I feel a bit like the scoreline doesn't really reflect how close it was. This was a 1-point game into the 4th quarter. Stafford looked excellent. He looked unbelievably good. And the one thing that the Rams did really well is they ran the ball really well. Kyron Williams kind of flashed for them a little bit in the early part of the season in September, then got hurt. I think they were 5th in rushing success rate overall yesterday of all the teams that played. And we all know about the McVay offense. Once you can get the ball on the ground moving and running the ball well, everything else kind of clicks into gear. So Kyron Williams looked really good. He looked explosive, particularly kind of running outside zone runs. Stafford was exceptional as per usual. When he's protected, he's still brilliant. There's not a lot of athleticism left in him because of all the injuries that he's had knocked out of him. But in terms of standing there and throwing the ball as hard as he can to his receivers, he's still very, very good. Puka Nacua was very good as well. Cooper Kupp was quiet, which was kind of strange for him. He might not necessarily be fully fit, but overall, I thought the Rams looked good. I feel bad for the Browns. I really do feel bad for them because this was a 1-point game going into the 4th quarter, and Joe Flacco, this is where you're old. Joe Flacco took a deep shot and the ball just it just died like a balloon. It just came down. It was one of those where you think maybe 10 years ago I would have had it. It's there. The corner route's on. It is there, but it just ran out of legs in the final kind of 10 yards of it. And then the problem they had was obviously it was intercepted. It was a big return back, which set the Rams up in the red zone, or just outside the red zone, which they scored from. And that was kind of the game, which was a shame for Cleveland because they played very, very well. But I'm just intrigued now with the Rams. They've kind of found a little bit of form. And the one thing I think they've got is they've probably got a few more answers now on offense with Nacua, with Kyron Williams, alongside Cooper Kupp, and still with Stafford being very, very good. I don't know, I feel a bit like the Packers, they've hit form at the right time somehow. It's a bit strange kind of how they figured it all out. But
yeah,
they looked, particularly once... that was the best the offense has played probably since week 1 when they beat Seattle, so convincingly in Seattle. And obviously they've had injuries and people have come and gone, and the offensive line's still an issue because they said if you can't protect Stafford, he's just going to take hit after hit, which is obviously why he missed time in the mid part of the season.
That's the problem.
That's kind of still a recurring issue. But to see them run the ball so well was they looked a bit more like the early McVay teams of kind of 2017 when he first went there with Todd Gurley. So that was a big positive. And as I said, they look more explosive on the ground and more explosive in the air, which I think for them, it's been their identity. The one thing I think with some McVay teams, you always think the offense is going to be good. And this year has been inconsistent, understandably so. But to play that well against a very, very, very good Browns defense was a really good step in the right direction. Obviously, they own the tiebreaker against Seattle. I think their strength of schedule, Green Bay's strength of schedule is really nice. I think they've got the Giants on Monday Night Football, and then maybe they've got Carolina and Tampa before they finish with divisional games against Minnesota and Chicago. So who knows what those 2 divisional games, but they should win the next 3. So the Rams are going to have to keep pace with them or hope somebody like Minnesota slip out. But I think they're playing really good football. And I think the one thing they've got, a bit like Green Bay, the quarterback's playing well. Where obviously with Minnesota, you can't necessarily say that because Josh Dobbs ultimately is a backup for a reason. It's an amazing story, but he's a backup for a reason where, here's a guy that's won a Super Bowl, made arguably one of the greatest throws in Super Bowl history. So, he's good enough to get you the big wins and the big throws when you need them. So this was an intriguing one. As I said, I feel sorry for the Browns. Like, a defense that good probably doesn't deserve, like, basically no. But what
No
really,
help.
like, yeah, like Watson got hurt. DTR's probably not ready. Like, I don't know what Joe Flacco's been doing for the last 8 months, but like, the last time he was good was like a decade ago. So like, realistically, like, as I said, I feel bad for the Browns just because I think, like, if they had like better quarterback play, they probably would have won.
Yeah,
But
they'd have won. They'd have won a few more games, wouldn't they? That's
yeah,
the thing, and they've still
like
won 7 games, and it's kind of crazy. But
which is really good. But like I said, so I feel bad for them. But the Rams are kind of moving into, and again, like, as a Lions fan, everyone's saying, like, could you imagine if Stafford came back and denied the Lions a win, their first ever home playoff game? Like, could you imagine? Like, but that's kind of the thing. Is like, he's playing really well. Like, the last 2 weeks, he played really, really well. He's still going to make like a daft throw now and again. You're never going to take that away from him. But some of the throws, like some of those tight window throws he makes, particularly yesterday, were just like, this is just ridiculous. Like, he shouldn't be able to make throws at his age with the injuries that he's had to like his hip and his elbow and his thumb and the concussions he's had and everything else. And he's still so good at just like firing the ball. So I think the Rams are a little bit more dangerous than probably what we expected a month ago. And it's going to be exciting to see how they finish, because they'll think, like, listen, like, if we can sneak in, we might be able to upset someone.
yeah, definitely. I mean, like you say, they've got the offensive minded, genius head coach. They've got Stafford, and they've got weapons. Cooper Kupp, like you say, probably still working his way back to fitness. Kyron Williams is shown out. Puka Nacua has been good all year. They've got enough firepower to upset someone, and they've got winnable games coming up. Enough winnable games anyway coming up in the rest of their season that they could get to 9 wins and probably make it into the playoffs with that. Like I say, depending on results elsewhere, but they've got the Ravens, the Commanders, the Saints, the Giants, which are 3 games that you look at and you think, yeah, they could win
You
those.
ought to win, yeah.
And then they finish off with the 49ers on the road. So that's a tough one. The 49ers might have already wrapped up seeding. They might be, will they rest players against the Rams? Maybe not. I don't know. But they can do it if they play to their potential, especially on offense. But like I say, it's got some storylines written all over it with the potential Stafford reunion and things like that. So yeah, definitely want to watch. Let's move on. And talk about some memes. Talk about some funny moments. You're going to talk about your Lions, so I'll let you shoot first on this one.
Oh, this was mint. Do you know what it is? This was like, the only thing I can think of is, like, whenever anyone mentions Jameson Williams on like Lions Twitter, I always just either send them the Sonic gif of, like, from the Sonic movie when, like, he's like running around like a blue blur, or like the Lightning McQueen I am speed. So my gif is the Lightning McQueen I am speed. I think he hit 21 miles an hour on that reverse end around for the touchdown, and then jumped in like Superman. It's scary, like, how fast he is without looking fast. Like, Tyreek Hill, like, he
Smooth,
looks like,
yeah.
or like thing glides, but like, he's so quick, like he gets up to speed so quickly. That was ridiculous. Like to see a Lions player do that, because said historically that they're not the type of receivers that the Lions have always kind of had. It's normally like big body possession guys.
Yeah.
So to have somebody like that just flat out just ran away from the Saints defense. I think Sam Laporta said he was just a flash. Like, I've just seen a flash in blue to just run past me, and like, he was in the end zone. So that was cool. As I said, and I hope, like, starting to get a little bit of rhythm. Obviously, had the gambling thing and then the injury, and it was kind of like, what a way to start an NFL career. Like, it's not the best, but he's slowly starting to kind of find his confidence, find his rhythm, and like, they're trusting him more. Which, as I said, like, the speed he showed on that is just devastating. Like, it was devastatingly quick. So that was
Absolutely.
my one.
Looks
Unbelievable
like
touchdown.
a good receiving call that could come together if everything kind of falls in place
Yeah.
with Amon-Ra and Laporta. Josh Reynolds obviously is there, and yeah, it's all there, all coming up things Lions at the minute. But my meme is this one that's come out of the NBA tournament with the Pacers point guard Tyrese Halliburton, who's having a great season in the NBA. I think it was ESPN or Bleacher Report, I can't remember, but one of them has put a quote on this meme that says, "I'm tired of being a loser," which is kind of, I think my meme recently have been quite negative, and I'm going to keep leaning into that one. But there's some bad teams in the NFL, and I spent my time on Sunday, as I said earlier, watching 2 of them. There must be a lot of fans of teams who feel like this, and they're just tired of losing, or in my case, tired of watching a win that feels like a loss. So yeah, this is this. It's just I want the season to be over from a Chargers point of view. I'm just tired of being a loser. So thank you for this, which I'm sure this meme will live on for a long time because it's got a lot of places that it can go.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's Sam memes. Obviously, Tom's not with us. He's not submitting anything for today. So we'll just move straight on into predictions. A couple of points for you and I last week. 1 point for the Bears wins that we predicted. I wasn't too far away with my Justin Fields 100-yard rushing prediction, but not really close either. Thomas went for the Vikings to win, so gets no points. So a couple more. So let's move on into tonight's game then between the Bengals and the Jaguars. Like you said, it's quite an easy one to predict this, really, isn't it?
Yeah, like be hard to see Jacksonville losing this one. Like, don't get me wrong, I think at times they're the kind of team that like have a lot of high highs and some really low lows. Like they're kind of prone to like the odd kind of really bad performance. But I think they'll win tonight. And the other thing as well, this is according to NFL Network, if the Jacksonville Jaguars win out, they'll be the 1 seed. Which I imagine will be the first time in NFL history that they would have had the 1 seed. So like they've got a lot to play for. For as much as their home record is a little bit, I think they're 2-3 at home and they're undefeated away from home. So their home record's a little bit questionable, but nevertheless, you still got a bye week, and having the number 1 seed kind of comes with that like confidence. In terms of score, because the Bengals' defense hasn't been like, obviously losing Jesse Bates and Von Bell, it's kind of hurt them a little bit as well. Like
massively,
they're only really generating a pass rush with Trey Hendrickson. Like they're not as good as what they have been in previous years. And then obviously the offense is kind of hamstrung with the quarterback. I'll go Jags 27, Bengals 13.
Okay. And what sort of like player prop are we talking?
I'll go Travis Etienne over 100 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown.
All right, 100 yards and 1 TD. Cool. Yeah, I'm going to go for something relatively similar. A little bit of a wider margin of victory, but yeah, Bengals 9, Jags 28 is my one. Yeah, they're playing Jake Browning at quarterback, for God's sake. You know, it's going to be tough for the Bengals to move the ball. And because of that, I'm going to go for Josh Allen to get 3 sacks because he's probably the biggest star on the Jags defense right now. He's having a great season. He's been really good.
Yeah, he's been absolutely brilliant.
And the Bengals tackles have probably been a bit under par, underwhelming for what they would have been expected to be like, prior to the season. So yeah, Josh Allen to continue his good form. The Jags to take the 1 seed, and kind of not a statement win because this is not the Bengals of that we'd expect, but taking care of business at home. And like I say, going into the home straight of the season with 10 wins in their belt, which they wouldn't have imagined. Well, 9. Are they 10 wins on 9 if they win this?
So they'll be on 9 wins.
They'll be on 9 wins, so they're not I'm getting ahead of myself. But still, 1 seed and right up there with the Ravens and the Dolphins. So that's about all we've got time for this week. So yeah, thank you for joining us. Head over to Touchdown, especially on Wednesdays, where a lot of our NFL content drops with Thomas's 5 wide winners and losers that I mentioned a couple of times. And Reese will have a couple of articles out as usual, his next gen stats, which might actually feature Jameson Williams. You never know. Running 21 miles an hour. He likes to throw these fastest players in. And we've got a lot of college content coming out in the next few weeks. Obviously, the college football regular season is now finished. We've got bowl season coming up. We will have a preview of every single bowl game with you for the Touchdown, a big undertaking from the college football team. So can't wait to be involved in that and also read all the work that's going to come out there. So yeah, like I say, stick with us here at the Touchdown for you college football. We'll also have CFL, we'll also have fantasy football and all the rest of it. But yeah, as we move forward, Tayyib, thank you for coming on tonight and enjoying a lovely conversation with me about the weird and wonderful workings of week 13 of NFL action that we've had. But yeah, like I said, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.